Hey everybody, welcome back. Today I'm going to be showing you how I used Airtable, Make.com, and Zapier to create a newsletter automation pipeline workflow for myself. And before I jump into the specifics, I wanted to give a high-level overview of how the pipeline works and kind of my general thoughts around why I chose to do it this way. So, as you can see here, we start with submitting a newsletter topic idea, and then we will automatically research the topic, scrape the URLs that we find, and then we will generate content summaries based off of the content that we scrape. And we are using OpenAI models and Anthropic models for this stuff as well. Once we have found all the research and we review it and we think it's good enough, we will decide, should we continue to the draft or should we continue researching? And if we want to research again, then for now, we can just manually research, and this is because I'm still very new to the process. I'm just experimenting to see what is possible, and so for that reason, I'm just leaving that up to the human. So once we've continued the drafting, and then we draft some newsletter articles, I have some pre-made prompts made for different types of newsletter articles that I find to be good for me. We will review the drafts, and you can have multiple generations of the drafts is the way I've set it up. So it could be like version 1, version 2, version 3, etc. And then for each of those versions, we can decide to repurpose the draft into a LinkedIn post or to a tweet. And then once we've decided that it's ready to schedule to buffer, we will automatically schedule those to buffer and then listen for when those are actually posted and then log the URL of the post once it's live back to the associated social media post record in Airtable. And the reason I'm doing that is so we have the option to maybe scrape the URLs of the posts to get the engagement metrics and build out an entire metrics Airtable as well. And then we end it. And so the reason I did it this way, and what you'll kind of find is there are bits and pieces of this pipeline that are automated, but they all still rest on the human input. And so this is kind of a newer concept that I'm, playing around with, that I'm going to just kind of coin as augmented intelligence. And maybe somebody's already said this, but the main idea is we've been thinking about AI in the wrong way. Artificial intelligence, that it's going to replace humans, it's more intelligent than humans. And my argument is no, the AI is the augmented intelligence of the human who is in the driver's seat that is now empowered to do more with their creativity, because we have all these tools surrounding you as the creative source. And so that's why I chose to do it this way. But with that being said, let's get into the beginning of the pipeline, and I'll try to show you as much as I can with keeping the video as concise as possible. So let's get into it. And so the first part, another reason I love Airtable is that they have built-in interfaces, so I can just kind of spin up something that I want to use as an input UI for myself. And so for me, it's going to be inputting the topic that I want to write about, any resource links that I've already found, and then notes about like what I want the article to be about, essentially. And so because some of these automations take some time, and they also require like time to take longer, like when we're watching the posts and we're waiting for those to be live, I'm going to show you some content that I've already generated with this pipeline. And so as you can see here, we have newsletter ideas table. We also have the research table, the drafts table, the social media posts, writing frameworks, prompts, social media analytics. You don't need to worry about all of these at the moment. Let's just focus on newsletter ideas. And let's take the second one, how creators can start using AI to repurpose their content. So this was the topic that I typed in. And then I wrote in the notes that I want to make the case for educational content creators to use AI to be more efficient in their content repurposing for things like tweets, free resource guides, etc. And now here's where the first part of the magic happens. So as you can see, we have all of these records below of research, and those were automatically found for us. And so I'm going to show you how I did that. Before I do that, though, I want to show you what it looks like. So if we find a record of research that we found, we have the topic associated for the research. So the associated topic, like what research was this for? What newsletter topic? The key insights, concepts, and yes, I could probably do with touching up the formatting, but all of this is going to go into another prompt as well. So I think this is quite all right. This isn't going to be user facing at all. And then the raw content, which is scraped from the URL. And we have the URL and when it was created. So that is what a record looks like when it is completely researched. And for this automation, I will show you what we are doing. And I know I'm going to get comments saying, you're showing your API keys. I'm just going to delete them all afterwards. So do not fret. So, okay. First one, automation research v3. You guys can tell like I said, I've been experimenting a lot, just running through walls, breaking stuff, and seeing what happens. So when a form is submitted, so when we first submit the newsletter idea, let me just kind of move this over. We're going to run the script to research and find the links to scrape first. And so the way I'm doing this, and you can find out how to use the Airtable API. They have their documentation literally connected to their script UI, so you can figure out how to find the table you're looking for to get the record that you want, etc., etc. But anyways, we're getting the newsletter table, we're getting the result of the most recent record that was submitted, and then I have this input config, and this is a special variable that is for putting in input values like your API keys and stuff like that, so you're not hard coding them into the script. Once we have those, I am creating a prompt to generate the search query for SERP API. And for those of you not familiar, SERP API is just a developer tool that helps you search for things on the internet at a high level. So what I'm doing is I'm generating a search query for the SERP API using OpenAI. So I'm saying, like, here's the topic, here are the notes. What's a good search query that we could generate to search the internet? So we get that back. We add the search query, we add the SERP API key, and we get our results. And then we create a record in the research table with the links. Now, once we've done that, we will find all the records that we just created. And the reason I'm doing that is so I can pull in all the links that need to be scraped. And so for this, again, we are getting all of the links from the research that we just did and created the records for. And what I'm doing is I'm actually calling a make.com webhook here to do the scraping, because the Airtable scripts for automations have a timeout of 30 seconds, and scraping some of these URLs takes longer than 30 seconds. That is my gigabrain reason why. But yeah, let's take a look at that automation next, because I think that will also kind of help tie this all together. So this is my make.com newsletter Kickstarter pipeline scrape and summarize automation workflow. And so the first part of this step is we are hitting the webhook that you saw in the automation script in Airtable. We are iterating over all of the links to scrape. As you can see here, we are passing in the sending body the links to scrape, and the payload is going to be an array of objects that has the URL and record ID. And so we're iterating over the links to scrape, and for each of those links, we are going to make the input start URLs, an array with the object key value URL, and the value will be the URL of the object that we're iterating over at this time. I am using the website content crawler for this. I will show you Appify in a second as well, for those of you not familiar on how that works. Once we have scraped that URL, we will get the results, and then we will use OpenAI's integrated endpoint here with a prompt to extract the key insights, concept summaries, and then we will then save that back to the research record that it's associated with. And we can do that because we have the record ID, which we sent in the very beginning. Now, let me show you Appify really quick to explain what we're doing. Okay, guys, so this is Appify, and again, for those of you not familiar, Appify is a platform that lets you find pre-made actors that you can run, and an actor is essentially just a web crawler for different use cases. I've personally found the most helpful ones to be this tweet scraper, and the website content crawler is pretty general use, and is the one that I'm using to scrape the researched URLs that we found. And so what this looks like here is you can actually see here in the API tab, you can find the API endpoints. And the one I'm using is running synchronously. So that is the URL that we are using. And the body, if you want to see what the body looks like, you can always go from this regular to JSON. And you can see that the start URLs variable is what we have for all the URLs. So instead of this being my LinkedIn profile link like it is right now, it would be the current URL in the iteration process of make. And then we will get all of the results back and save those to Airtable. And cool, so that is the first kind of big step of this process is, okay, you are writing your newsletter, you got a topic, you got an idea, just submit and then see what the automation comes back with in terms of research and articles and stuff like that. And now, once we've actually researched and have all of the different pieces of research here, let me just show you what one of these looks like. And I just named this something that I could, kind of determine where it came from. So how creators start using AI to repurpose. It's essentially the title and then the run number of the of the research. So like, which run was this from for researching? Was this the first or the second? And you can see that we have the status here as scraped and summarized, so we know. Has the associated topic linked, so it has the record of the topic that we were researching for linked to this as well. We have the key insights, concept summaries. And we have the raw content, and then that, again, that is scraped from Apify. And now that we have all these, we can go back to our newsletter ideas table, and I could hit generate draft. I already have drafts generated, so I'm going to show you what those look like. And let me show you that before I show you what the script for generating the draft looks like. So in the draft table, you can see that we have the status, we have different buttons, which I will get into, like repurposing to LinkedIn, Twitter thread. Still working on the save to Google Doc at the moment. Not really sure if it was actually necessary. But anyways, let's just open this up and take a look. We see that there's the subject line, and then we have the draft content. And this would be the newsletter draft. And then we also have the newsletter topic that it was, inspired by. And then we have the social media posts that were repurposed from this specific draft. And so you can see I already have some, and I will be getting into that later on in the video. But first, let's talk about how we actually are repurposing this draft. So if I go to extensions, and if you are wondering, an extension lets you add different things to your Airtable. So for my purposes, I've only been adding the scripting extension. So when I press these buttons, I can run scripts. So let's go into the code and we can see what we're doing here. So first we're getting the newsletter idea table, the research table, and the drafts table. We're going to find the idea that we want to generate a draft for. And we are also going to find the version number of the draft that was last created, so then we can add a new version number for this generated draft. And then I have the system prompt here. First is generating the subject line. And then I am getting all of the different summaries from the associated ideas record. And here in the user message, I am saying, you are an expert copywriter, ghostwriter, specializing in writing newsletters. I'll provide you with a topic, writer's notes, research summaries and insights, and information about writing framework to use. Your task is to write a compelling newsletter draft based on the provided information. So here's the topic of the newsletter. There's the topic, writer's notes. Those would be the notes that we submitted in the beginning. The formatted summaries, those would be the summaries that we generated for each of the research pieces that we found. And then we have a writing framework, which I did not actually select yet, so let me just do that really quick and make sure it's there. So yes, the writing framework is Ada, and so for this, I will show you what it looks like. Essentially, I started making a table of different writing frameworks and then an overview of how the writing framework works, so I could pull those in dynamically in the script. And so in here, when you see the writing framework, I'm actually pulling in the writing framework overview, not just the name of the writing framework. Last thing I say is these are just personal things. I would like it to not use emojis. I would like it to use an active voice and vary the sentence, rhythm, and structure. And then I'm asking it to return it in a XML format. So I'm saying return the subject line like this and the newsletter draft in tags like this. And then we get on to calling Claude. And the reason I'm using Claude is because I found it to have better writing outputs than GPT-4 overall. And yes, I see my API key there. This will be removed once the video is posted. Then we are calling the Anthropic API, and we are getting the response. And then I've created some regexes here to find what we are looking for, which would be the subject line and the newsletter draft. Now, the reason I opted for this as well is because I was looking into how I could get Claude to output JSON, and it can do that. I was just running into some parsing issues when it was returning the JSON and some unexpected token. It was probably my fault. I was kind of tired when I was doing it, and I decided to just go for this because it was easier. And so we look for a match in the response from Claude 3. We get that match, and then we will save that to the drafts table. So we're saving the newsletter draft as the draft content. We're saving the idea that it's associated with by getting the ID of the idea record that we are generating a draft for. We're saving the subject line. We are adding the status, the next version number, the name, and the writing framework used. Now, we have the drafts, so let's look at what we do with the drafts. And now for this, I'm just going to show you how I've set it up for repurposing to tweets and then scheduling those tweets and tracking when those are posted automatically. So when I click this repurpose to Twitter button, again, it will be sort of the same thing. If I go to my extensions and I go to the drafts dashboard, we have this repurpose to tweet script, and it will be the same thing. Like, we're just getting the record. We are setting up the call to Anthropic. I do have it's a different prompt here. I'm using a configuration, so I'm giving its configuration into a JSON format because I find structured data is better for it to understand what I'm talking about. So I'm saying, like, the objective, create a Twitter short form post, and like, here's the post content options that you could kind of create. So something that's like a surprise to you, something that's a learning, something that's an application that's more like a practical, like learning, an opinion, an analogy, anecdote, all this good stuff. And something else that I sort of played around with was adding what I call a soft cap to the length of the output. And so for me, this was just a series of trial and error, trying to see which number was the magic number. And as you know, if you're on Twitter a lot, 280 characters is the maximum amount of characters that you can post a short form text to. And that is especially for APIs like Buffer or Tweet Hunter. You can't go over the max limit. And so what I did is I created a soft cap of 200 characters. And so what I found when I did this is that Claude would go over 200, but would very rarely, and I don't think has yet, gone over 280 characters. And comparing this to when I said don't go over 280 characters, it would actually go a bit over 280 characters. And it makes a difference because this would cause the automation to not work. This means, like, if the tweet is too long, then it can't be sent to Zapier and scheduled properly. So that I just wanted to make note of that. Again, prompt engineering is an art just as it is a science. So we are calling Claude. We are getting the response. Again, I have a regex here to find the output that we're looking for. I said I wanted it returned in tweet tags. And then we are saving it to the social posts table. We are setting the status to in review. And let's look at what we do after that. So if we go to social media posts, let's just go to the one that was already scheduled and sent right here. We have the name. So this is, again, the naming convention. You can decide what you want. This is the name of the topic and the number of repurposed content that this is on. So this was like the first piece of repurposed content from that topic. So we have the platform, the content type, we have the post content, and what I do is when I hit if I changed this to like ready to schedule, which I did, we have an automation right here that will run and so what we're doing here is we are calling a Zapier webhook and passing in all this information, which I will explain as we go along. So let's look at what the Zapier webhook is doing right now. But before we do, let's also take note of what we are sending. We're sending the record ID of the current social post record, its post content, the content type, the platform, when to schedule it, and the record ID for the tags. And this is actually irrelevant, so we can remove that. Also, before we get into Zapier, I did want to mention, yes, you need to schedule when you want this to be posted before you can actually submit it for being ready to schedule. Now let's move on to Zapier. Okay, so now let's look at Zapier and let's see what we're doing. So we are first catching a webhook, the webhook that we're calling, and we're picking off the child key scheduled post info because that is the key of the object that we're sending in the body that has all the information that we want. As you can see here in the test trigger, we have a test record that has all of the information, and then we get into the paths. And so the paths, all you need to know is one is for when the platform is Twitter and one is for when the platform is LinkedIn. And the reason that I did this is because there are just a few minor things that need to be changed in the buffer section, which is like the channel that you're posting to. And so for that reason, I made it in this sort of structure. And we can talk about the date formatting a little bit. All I was doing is I was just taking the date that we sent and making sure that it was formatted to the right format for buffer. And I don't think it honestly matters, but I just wanted to do it for my own sanity. Once we've converted the time or the scheduled date to a timestamp, we will then connect our buffer account. Once you've connected it, you will select your organization, and then you will select the channel. And since this is for Twitter, I selected the Twitter channel. And then for the text, I used the text that we sent in the body of the post request to the Zapier webhook, and then the scheduled post info also has the scheduled for date. And so once we've added it to buffer, I'm going to find the Airtable record that has the same scheduled date, and then I will use that record's ID to update that record to now have the unique buffer ID for that piece of content. So now when we are watching for these to go live, we can find the associated record of the social media post that just went live by using this buffer ID. And so let me explain that right now. Okay, so this is the second part of the Zapier automation that I have set up. So what's happening here is we are watching for when buffer actually sends a post or makes it live. And so this is the information that we'll get back. And honestly, the only thing that we need is the ID and the service link that we get back from this response. So once we have something scheduled and then it was posted, it will trigger this right here. And then we will go find the record with the associated ID. And then we will update that record by its ID, and we will add the service link. And that is what you would see show up right here. And now the reason I did this is because I want to continue to build on top of this workflow pipeline that I'm making and make a table for tracking social media analytics by pulling in the analytics from the URLs of the posts that are already posted. And so this was my first experiment into exploring the world of automations, low code, no code for content workflows. I'm honestly pretty excited and happy that I'm starting to figure things out, and I hope that you guys found this video at least insightful or got your brain jogging in different ways that you could use these tools for your own content workflows and processes. And again, the key concept that I want to hammer home is that I want to make this augmented intelligence. I want to use AI and automations to sort of build the super-powered robot armor that the human driver walks in. And if that sounds exciting to you, you can join my free school, Hackers and Painters. We cover everything for leveraging AI on content automation, generation, creation, repurposing, all the good stuff. If you like the video, drop a comment, drop a like, drop a sub if you haven't already. And until next time, much love and peace, y'all.